We're continuing with the Maamar of Pesach 1984, Achnos of Pesach, and the Rebbe discusses the difference between land and sea. On land, most of the creations, almost all the creations on land, seem to live and exist independently from their source, which is the earth, as it's mentioned in the beginning of the 10 statements that created the world, that that the ground should give out, should extract animals, and also should give out plants. So we see by the animals and by person world that they're independent from the ground, from the earth. They're walking around independently, not connected and so tightly related to the source of their life. On the other hand, the creatures in the sea are very tightly connected to their source, and if they do separate from the water, immediately they expire. So the Rebbe explains it that this is also the difference between the two levels in Avodas Hashem and serving the Eibishter. There is one level that is serving the Eibishter like someone that's independent, like someone that lives on dry land, and he seems to be independent from the source of his existence. And there's one that serves the Eibishter on a higher level, serves Hashem on a level that is completely in a state of nullification. With this, the Rebbe also explains the difference between leaving Mitzrayim and reaching Kriyas Yamsuf. In the beginning of the Maamar, the Rebbe asked the question, why is it there's a need to go through the split of the sea? It was enough leaving Egypt. Leaving Egypt meant refining all the sparks, the holy sparks that were in Egypt. So they already accomplished their goal. What was their need for Kriyas Yamsuf? So the Rebbe explains with the difference between these two facts that one of them is that a person is still an independent entity for himself, which is like someone that lives dry land. Then there is someone that is completely enclosed and part of Elikus, godliness, becomes one with godliness. This is the difference between leaving Egypt and the split of the sea. Leaving Egypt was, to a certain extent, there was a level of nullification, a level that they took world and they redeemed it, the sparks, the sacred sparks in Egypt. On the other hand, in order that it should be an ultimate nullification, a true nullification, so this is the idea of Kriyas Yamsuf, which is revealing the highest levels of godliness and thereby drawing down a higher state of nullification. So now we'll see it on page 1500 inside in the top of the page. Aval Afal Pikein, it's the last two pages of the Maamar, that's where it's stapled, 1500 and then 1501, for finishing the Pesach Maamar. So the Rebbe says, Aval Afal Pikein, still, Haya'oz Eifan Aveda, the Aveda, the service that was taking place, the stage that they were up to when they left Egypt, Sha'adayin Yash Mitziyah Shal Eilam Amargesh Es Mitziyusei. There is still a Mitziyah, an entity of world, and the world senses its being. It senses that it is an entity. And as the Rebbe explained once in a Sicha, which is based on what the Frierdiker Rebbe once said, that the difference between healthy and not healthy is, a healthy person does not feel himself. A healthy person always feels, he knows he has 248 limbs and 365 veins, but he doesn't feel in an unusual way himself. When does a person begin feeling himself? When something is aching him. Something is feeling pain. When he feels already something is not in order, that's when he starts feeling himself. So the previous Rebbe says, and the Rebbe mentioned it by Fabringen in Yutas Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, Tovshin Chafei, 1965, that the same thing is also in spiritual sense. When a person feels himself, it's not healthy. It's a sign of unhealthy. On the other hand, when a person doesn't feel himself, then he feels that he's not an entity for himself. So therefore, going out of Egypt was a state that there was still a world, Umargish es mitziyusi, and he still senses his entity. He does what is requested from him, what is expected from him. And therefore, but still, he is a mitziyus for himself, he's an entity for himself. Avol Kadesha Yele Rak Bitla Yeshel Bitl Bimtsias Bitla Miti Betachlis, in order there should be not only the Bitla Yesh, which Bitla Yesh means that it's only the coarse level of his entity is nullified, but not a complete nullification. Which, as mentioned in a previous year, the difference is when a person is sitting in the street, not sitting hopefully in the street, the person has more what to do with himself, but a person that's walking the street and he gets a word that the king wants to see him. So what happens then? So the first reaction is that he loses a certain part of his composure because the king wants to see him. So he forgets about everything around him in the market, in the street, and he begins running toward the palace. But he's still somebody. When somebody asks him, "Who are you?" he knows who he is. He's able to speak to people, although he still feels the pressure of going to the king. This is called bitla yesh, that the coarse aspects of his mitzias, of his entity, stands in a state of nullification. Once he comes to the king, he becomes speechless. That's already a higher level of nullification. That's called bitl hamitzios, that he's not an entity for himself. To the extent, as we say when we begin Shemoneh Esrei, we say Hashem svasai tiftach, that the Eibishter should open up our lips. We're speechless. So this is the difference between bitl hayesh and bitl hamitzios. Bitl hayesh is just the overall course of his of his being, of his entity, but then there is a deeper nullification that is completely not an entity for himself, like he's standing in front of the king. Who accomplished this nullification? For this, a person needed the inyan of Kriyas Yamsuf. Gilui inyan hayam, inyan bitl b'mtzias. The revelation of the Yam, which means the revelation of the Yam and what the Yam, the sea, represented, and bitl hametzias, a state of nullification. This is the preparation for receiving Torah. Because when a person feels like dust, that my soul should be like dust for everyone. Al derech, like the expression in the Mishnah, "V'shval ruach b'fnei kol adam," and the expression is b'fnei kol adam is even for non-Jews. Be'emes, in the real way, hinei oz dafka nasa psach libi b'sirasecha. That's when his heart could open up to Torah. Why is the Rebbe saying all this? Because the Kriyas Yamsuf was a preparation for Matan Torah, and not only for Matan Torah, the diak of here is Kabbalah Torah, receiving Torah, because Yidden needed to prepare for Matan Torah, so it wasn't sufficient being in Egypt and like a furnace that refines and takes out, extracts all the waste material, which is mixed with silver, with gold, but there was also a need of a state of a complete nullification. This is the Yam, splitting of the sea, going through the sea, the revelation, what took place then, the prophecies that they saw. They became an appropriate vessel to receive Torah. This is like fish, like fish that are walking on dry land, which means that they experienced, in dry land, they experienced something which is from sea. The level of sea was revealed in dry land, which actually, this is the name of the Maamar, Hofach Yom Leyabasha. He took Yam, sea, and he turned it into dry land. Shavedosam hi aveda ruchnis. Their aveda is an aveda, spiritual aveda. Evdei Hashem b'nishmasam. They're serving the Eibishter with their neshama. Not so much the stress on the body, but on their soul. Serving the Eibishter from the perspective and on the standards of the neshama. Which this is similar to what the Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah, this Parsha Shmini, that there are certain tzaddikim that were not able to fulfill mitzvahs begashmis in a physical sense. Rashbi, Rav Shimon ben Yochai, that he was in a cave 12, 13 years, and he wasn't able to fulfill Torah mitzvahs in the fullest meaning. Kiddush, matzah, the lashon is matzah, kiddush, lulav, sukkah, all these inyanim, he couldn't do it in a physical sense. What did he do? He accomplished it in a spiritual sense through the kavanas, meditations, And this is how he accomplished it. And it's interesting, when we look in the Aoris in the back of this Maamar is a very historical Maamar.